Hello, welcome to this webinar for administrators on how you can help your teachers make sustainable change utilizing the OpenSciEd instructional materials. My name is Kim Lemberger. I am the Director of Learning for the Einstein Project located in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I have been a classroom teacher for 27 years. And over the last 3 years, we here at Einstein have been very busy helping a lot of districts do their piloting, their implementation, and their vetting of resources. And so what initiated the idea for this podcast or video is that a lot of time goes into picking materials, a lot of time goes into vetting them, approval by your school board for adopting them. And what sometimes gets overlooked or underestimated is the implementation phase. So I am going to share with you some information about how you as a district leader can support your teachers should they be interested in implementing or using OpenSciEd in the classroom. All right, let's get started. So take a look at these visuals and just kind of think for a minute, which one of these images are most like your current science materials? I know in my experience of 27 years in the classroom, I'd say that I was probably, my curriculum was probably like cone number 2. It was there. It had some good points, I see the picture there has some chocolate in it or whatever, but it was kind of drippy, meaning that it didn't flow always the best, and it did the job, but it wasn't necessarily NGSS aligned. Although when I was in the classroom, I did feel that I was doing next generation science standards, and it wasn't until leaving the classroom and coming here to the Einstein Project when we were looking for new materials that I realized how much I still didn't know about what what next generation standards really required, or what they had in mind for what science education would look like. I had only been teaching at the tip of the iceberg when I left the classroom, and I thought I was further along than what I had been. Next, I'd like you to take a look at these images and think about your science teachers. Could be middle school, could be high school. There may be some teachers in your building who've written their own curriculum, and they've spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears creating quality instruction for their students. There may be some teachers who are using stuff, but maybe they don't have necessarily the science background to feel comfortable with it. So they're just kind of following the recipe and doing, what the books are telling them to do. There may be some teachers that are just, trucking along like, hey, yeah, I feel pretty good about what I'm doing. I think on any given day, as a teacher, I could be all 3 of those people, depending upon what was happening. So just think for a minute about, where would your science teachers be as far as in relation to that curriculum? Are they closely tied to it and have strong feelings and beliefs about the quality? Or are they kind of second guessing or confused by things? These types of ideas are going to be helpful as far as the context you use to intentionally plan your implementation for using OpenSciEd. So what's the big deal with OpenSciEd? Maybe you're considering using it because everybody else is using it, right? It just seems like since the middle school materials are all finished, they have all reached NGSS badge of high quality materials, that these just seem to be the best that are out there right now. And that not only that, but they're free, right? They're available for free. So let's talk a little bit about how these materials came into being. So this is a very strong consortium of of world-class developers, science administrators, teachers. The developers of these curriculum materials are the same people who wrote the next generation science standards. These are the authors of the book, A Framework for K-12 Science Education. These are the people who understood NGSS before it even got out into the public. And it was a vision to change how things were being done. We've got a lot of different partnerships that have been put into place. Here's our middle school development team, researchers, scientists, teachers, the high school development team, and this is the elementary team. The elementary right now, the elementary program is under development. And so what you find is that you have all of these people who have done the research. They know what the standards are to accomplish. And what happened was when they released the standards, none of the materials that were out there were they weren't cutting the mustard, so to speak. They just weren't meeting the expectations. So they decided to go ahead and write what the expectations should be. All of these units are being field tested. So as you can see here, we've got 10 different states, thousands of students, hundreds of teachers that are taking these units and putting them into practice. They are brought back for iteration. They are then submitted for third-party evaluation. And only at that point will they be released to the public. So that's part of the plan, was to make sure that these are not released for people to use. But you'll also notice that it was for a variety of students, not just a few. And so that's one of the reasons why we have the different funders for OpenSciEd. You can see here the names of the philanthropic organizations who have wholeheartedly supported the efforts of all of these developers and consortiums, with the idea that these materials are going to be openly available to any teacher, any student, anywhere. We know as district leaders that curriculum is expensive, and maybe we only get to adopt new stuff every 7 to 10 years. So if the barrier for getting high quality materials in front of every student is expense, then that is no longer the case. So the vision was to make these materials the highest of quality, and they are available to every student. So there's a very big component to OpenSciEd, which is the accessibility and equity of having access and opportunity for high quality instructional materials. So what do these look like? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at, the setup of the OpenSciEd instructional materials, but they are certainly aligned. They are very strong and heavy into the science and engineering practices, which is how kids are learning about the science, the concepts. They focus on having a problem or a phenomenon at the beginning of every unit, which kind of gives the kids something to get curious about. And it's more than a hook. It's to drive their curiosity. It's to keep them wondering about, well, why is that? Or how did that work? And as students are presented with phenomena, they're then asking their own questions about, how do we figure this out? How do we explain this? And the instructional model is like a roadmap. So they start out with this anchoring phenomenon. They develop the questions. That's the driving question board. And then those questions actually become the storyline of the instruction. So it's making sense to the kids as to, well, what questions are we investigating or trying to answer, and how are we going to do that? So it turns a lot of the learning and ownership over to the kids. The teacher then uses the navigation routine to figure out like, okay, so we did this experiment or we did this investigation and we figured this out, but now we still don't know about that. And so making those very clear connections from the student's perspective of why you're doing what you're doing in the classroom. Students have a variety of investigations that they are a part of. Some of those investigations involve experimentation. Some of them have to do with gathering information and listening or reading, listening to podcasts or reading information. And then the time is intentionally spent to be putting pieces together, meaning that after a certain number of lessons, we're going to stop and we're going to really put together what little pieces did we find out in each of our days of the unit so far to be able to figure out what we know for sure and what we still have to figure out. What makes this different from other programs is that it is written from the coherency of the student. So it's written to be understood as the student is going along. A textbook is typically written by the experts, right? And according to the expert, they say, you need to know this first, then you need to know this, and then you need to do this. So they're kind of taking the thinking out and the figuring out away from the students when they are writing a textbook like that. So OpenSciEd is really focused on helping the students figure out what's happening and why it's happening. So as I said before, one of the caveats of these materials is that they are going to be always available for free, and they are in a Google format. So every teacher anywhere can go in, they can download the materials for free, and they can use them. So let's talk a little bit about what does that mean, this free thing. So it is created as an open education resource, meaning that you are able to share the resource with other people, with parents, with all the teachers. You don't need a license per teacher. And you are able to adapt those materials as you see fit. This is important because there isn't a one size fits all, right? So teachers are going to need to reformat or revise worksheets for students that have other needs, as well as for the scaffolding that needs to occur for all students to be successful. So as long as you are giving credit to OpenSciEd, teachers are freely available to go ahead and make modifications. But let's talk about this freedom, this free thing again. So I like this analogy that was shared with me a couple years ago. There's free, like, hey, let me buy you a beer, right? Like, oh, okay, you know, it's not too much cost, and you just have to have a little time investment to get to know me or get to know each other, right? And then it's done, fairly short term. And then there's free, like, hey, here's a puppy, right? As cute as those puppies are, they are a lot of work, right? You're going to have some expenses put into place when you're caring for a puppy. You're going to have some intentional time to take care of that puppy if you want it to be raised in a healthy and beneficial way, right? So OpenSciEd is definitely free like a puppy, okay? So you might not be paying for the curriculum, but there are going to be other costs and trade-offs in your school when you are using OpenSciEd. So let's take a look first at the scope and sequence. So the middle school scope and sequence is the first to be finished. They were releasing them as they became available. You'll notice that in each of the grade bands, there are both physical, earth, and life science embedded. So it's not 1 year is earth, 1 year is physical, 1 year is life. So that may be one of the changes you might have to consider if you're going to use OpenSciEd as their scope and sequence. You could teach it out of sequence. If you wanted to regroup the units, it's possible. Keeping in mind, if you do that, for example, in this situation, if you move those 8th grade physical science units down to 6th grade, that means that those students are going to have some science concepts and math concepts that are 8th grade level. So the developers were very intentional with making sure that the units, the math and the reading and writing that is required for students is grade level appropriate, and it's aligned with Common Core. So you could definitely, like I said, you could rearrange them. If you choose to do so, you're going to have to put more time in. Your staff is going to have to really figure out where the gaps are, how are we going to fill the gaps, and what kinds of accommodations are we going to have to make if students aren't prepared with the skills for science or for math or reading that they need to achieve what they're achieving. The high school scope and sequence is here. You'll notice that they're almost finished. They came out about a year ago. The first unit hit the public, and they've been trickling out as they have met NGSS standards. Notice what's different about the high school materials is that you have biology and earth science. You have chemistry and earth science. You have physics and earth science. The learning for students is embedded into the context of an earth and space science. So what might be a challenge that you might need to consider is that these are not your traditional classrooms. This is not traditionally how biology is taught within the context of an earth and space concept. So your teachers at the high school level who are experts in the areas of science, chemistry, for example, they are experts in chemistry, but they might not feel comfortable or might not be as fluent in the earth science information that is set for the context here. So that's something you are going to want to carefully consider before you move into a full adoption. Have the teachers test out a couple of these units. It is, like I said, it is not your traditional science class, and it's not supposed to be. That's the whole point with OpenSciEd. It is meant to disrupt how students are learning science. It is to help them become better thinkers, better problem solvers, and the best person to model that for them is the classroom teacher. So it's going to challenge teachers quite a bit at the upper level to fully embrace this philosophy of learning. Finally, the elementary scope and sequence is just underway. The first units are hopefully going to be released sometime this summer, and they are scheduled to be finished, I believe, by the fall of 2026. So they are going through the process of writing and field testing. And those same field testing states and teachers and schools are doing the field testing as well. So we're really excited to see what these are going to look like as the new elementary materials are being released. So how can you, as an administrator in your district, help your teachers should they decide or come to you and say, we want to use this stuff? The first thing I'm going to recommend, and where I'm getting my information from here is from, we have been helping districts here in Wisconsin for the last 3 years, at least, with their piloting and implementation. And so what I've decided to share with you today are some comments that we get or hear or are provided for us through some of the evaluations we've received as far as teachers who are in the middle of an implementation. So these are comments that came from actual classroom teachers that have gone through professional development with us. And I think it's pretty insightful. The one thing we want you to consider is that you yourself become familiar with OpenSciEd. This teacher says, there's a dramatic shift in pedagogy. There's very few down days. It's not like you're, hitting the button on a video and watching it for 50 minutes. The video that is included in OpenSciEd are very short, and they're made that way to conserve bandwidth, as well as to just be enough to get the kids talking about it. It's not there for the learning, to substitute for learning. It's there to help assist the learning. Also, the teacher here says that there's fewer assignments and less paperwork, so it feels different. And it's not only going to feel different for the teacher, it's going to feel different for your students if they are not used to learning this way. So having a good idea about what OpenSciEd looks like. I know that there are professional development opportunities and webinars, other webinars out there that may help you with your understanding of OpenSciEd. You'll see a lot of use of the practices. So it's very minds-on. It might not be as hands-on as science has been in the past, but that doesn't mean that it's not science, right? So using models, analyzing data, constructing explanations, arguing from evidence. These are all the skills that scientists use in the real world to do their jobs. And so students are using those same science and engineering practices to be able to learn the science concepts that they're talking about. Another key point for you to consider is your resource allocation. So again, we know there's no such thing as a free lunch. And so whereas you may have purchased a workbook or a textbook, because these materials are completely Google friendly, and you can decide whether or not your teachers are going to use the materials in a digital platform and always be using them through your learning management system, or if there's going to be some science notebooks going on and there's going to be some photocopying that needs to occur. So that's one thing to consider, that you may be having that, instead of having that one-time big paycheck or a big check for a textbook adoption, this may be something that's rolled out in a little slower, but you're still going to have some costs with your photocopying and printing that needs to happen. This teacher shared that she only needed the non-consumable kit. The consumable kits were mostly things that were already part of the school budget. So for example, there are going to be a lot of sticky notes, a lot of chart paper, a lot of dots. So those types of things maybe aren't part of your normal science budgets. There are still science supplies that are needed, right? Digital scales, beakers, balances, those hot pots. Those are some things that are also needed. So the materials list for each unit is available on the OpenSciEd website, so you can go there, you can take a look. If teachers have the science equipment, there's very little specialized equipment that they're going to need to purchase. Most of it will be the consumable things that are used up each year. This teacher also says that buying the ready-made kits is helpful. Not only helpful for new teachers, but helpful for teachers who are getting used to teaching this way. We worked with some school districts who went ahead and purchased kits because they wanted to ease the burden for teachers to not have to worry about prepping and buying stuff. They wanted them to focus their time and attention on understanding the material and being able to give their attention to the students. So buying the kits ahead of time, instead of having that part of your budget process, might be a different change in your processes. There are a number of kit vendors who are available to sell kits to you. They are also available on the OpenSciEd website. So you can talk to them about what they include in their kits, how many pieces does it come with, that type of thing. So your resource allocation might look a little different than it has traditionally because of what you're using, how you're using it. Also, your professional development. So this is probably the biggest reason why I am coming to you today to share this idea about intentional implementation. And I'm talking about ongoing implementation. It's not a one and done. This is a change. This is a disruption to how things are being done in classrooms. And in order for that to be sustainable, it has to be continued to be supported. So this teacher went to the webinars, or viewed the webinars, which are also available on the OpenSciEd website. Attended an NSTA sense-making webinar. Also found the book Ambitious Science Teaching to be a helpful resource. So that book is excellent, and also the website was also very helpful if you're looking for running some kind of a book study with your science teachers to help them implement these materials. That would be a nice way to pair it together and to build that teacher understanding. This next teacher said it's important to provide ongoing professional learning. It says here they should have time over the summer for a 4-day introduction at a minimum, and then ongoing support of some type if you want your implementation to happen. It's an overwhelming experience. A lot of the teachers that are using these materials, whether they've been teaching for 20 years or 2, it is a big lift. It is heavy and it is overwhelming. And so the more support you can provide for your teachers in professional learning is going to pay off. The OpenSciEd recommendation is that all participants go through a 4-day, it's called a curriculum launch. And in that curriculum launch, you really get to dig deep into how students are learning. So sometimes I think professional development for a new series is more like a training, right? It's like, here's your stuff, here's how you use it. And that's what, as teachers, that's what we're used to. The reason this is a 4-day is because we're not just looking at how are you using the stuff, it's how are kids making sense? How are students thinking through this learning experience? So that's pretty significantly different. And the better your teachers understand that, the easier that implementation is going to be. Also, after that initial 4-day, there are still going to be certain embedded routines that teachers are going to struggle with. Things like productive discourse. How do I get my kids to talk and be productive with it and stay on task? How about your sense making? Like, why is this written this way? That doesn't make sense. Why don't we just tell them this? Or why they need to know these terms before we can talk about what the concepts are. And that's actually flipped. In OpenSciEd, the vocabulary comes after the concept has been learned and talked and practiced. So students are using their own voice and their own way of expressing their ideas through writing and through reading, drawing pictures and labeling them. So there's a lot of universal design for learning embedded in this. So ongoing professional development is not only going to help your teachers fine-tune their delivery, but it's also going to help them with their understanding and keep them motivated to keep doing what needs to be done. So just like there's not a one size fits all for students, it's the same for teachers too. Change is going to be hard, especially when you put blood, sweat, and tears into writing your own materials or own curriculum. So it's important to be sensitive and mindful of what teachers are going to go through. One of the resources that we have found to be useful in helping schools make this transition is the Change Management Toolkit from the folks out at Berkeley. This is a resource that's shared with, we got from Carolina Biological. Carolina Biological Supply Company and Einstein Project have partnered for, oh my gosh, 30 years or so with materials and professional development. So recently we've been also assisting Carolina with their professional development for OpenSciEd for their version. And this change management toolkit was used in one of the professional learning sessions we were doing with them that I think would be very helpful in helping you as a district administrator figure out What other kinds of things need to be in place. Again, knowing that your teachers are going to be kind of at a variety of levels, you can't just have one form of professional development. Just like, again, like our students, we would want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the educator, meet them where they're at and bring them along. So you're going to have a variety of non-use teachers who aren't using materials that are highly high quality. You're going to have some teachers who maybe have some background with NG and SS and storylines, but they're not necessarily following a specific curriculum. Maybe they've written their own and have embedded things. And then, of course, we want all educators at some point in their journey of a career to be able to really look at materials to see where the NGSS alignment is. And ideally, you'd have your teachers at this point, after maybe 3 or 4 years of utilizing OpenSciEd, they'd be able to confidently go out and find a new phenomenon that's maybe more local or relevant to students, and they'd be able to write that in or substitute it with confidence and make the adjustments necessary for the storyline to be coherent for your students. So we'd want teachers to be able to be comfortable using these embedded routines and instructional practices with no matter how they're teaching, right? Whether it's in 10 years or in 7 years, we'd want them to just have those really good practices in place. OpenSciEd has also developed free professional learning materials. So all the stuff that we use as certified learning professionals for OpenSciEd, those are all available to you. The PowerPoints, the handouts, the teacher's notes, the facilitator's notes are all available to you free and downloadable on the OpenSciEd webpage. On the on-demand page, you'll also find the recorded webinars for each of the units. Those are about an hour in length and will give about a 10,000-foot view of the unit storyline and anchoring phenomenon. Those are put on by one of the writers and one of the field testing teachers. So very informative. Also on the on-demand teacher support, the Facebook groups. So there's a very active Facebook community with OpenSciEd. It's a great place. I go there to find out, well, how can we make modifications, or what worked best in this lesson? Did anybody have a better way of doing it? Or does anybody have a notebook, a student notebook that's already formatted? So it's teachers for teachers, and people are very friendly and helpful. Those Facebook groups are also moderated by one of the writing teachers and one of the field testing teachers. So there's a variety of free on-demand teacher support, but if you're not able to get some of the more specific professional learning, that could be a place you go to find. Maybe you'll want to look for videos of what does this look like in the classroom. So the professional learning materials have classroom videos with teachers in the field test that were giving instruction. And it would be a good activity to have your teachers watch those and kind of look at how the teacher was facilitating the discussion. So those are just a few places to go for ongoing support for OpenSciEd. The next point to consider is your collaboration and PLCs. So we've said it takes a lot of time and effort. The students are driving, but it's a mindset shift. And so there are going to be times when it's utterly frustrating because you can't get your kids to talk, or there's going to be times where it was so incredibly awesome that your kids were having a discussion or breakthrough with understanding that you've never had before. So having other people to be able to collaborate with, taking time outside of the normal day, Lots of teachers feel like brand new teachers, whether they've been teaching for 20 years or 2 years, they feel like a brand new teacher again. They studying over the weekend for what I'm going to be doing on Monday and the following week. The teacher's manual is pretty dense with information. It's all good, but it can be somewhat overwhelming and distracting. So having other people to be able to talk to about this implementation during implementation is helpful. Another important thing to keep in mind are who else is in the classroom when teachers are delivering instruction. So including your special ed teachers, your ELL support people, maybe your instructional coaches. Those are all people who would benefit from being part of the collaboration and conversations as well. Oftentimes a para might be in the classroom, and the way that they've helped students in the past was just to kind of tell them the answer or to pre-teach some vocabulary or something like that. And having those other professionals that work with students kind of in the loop on how this instruction is delivered differently will help them be a support in the classroom instead of being counteractive and taking some of that sense making away from students and in an attempt to make it easier for them or less of a struggle. So having those support people in the implementation plan is also going to be beneficial. Feedback and evaluation, as an administrator, you're going to do some observations. It's important to know what to look for. What do we want to see? How should students be acting? What should teachers be doing? I like what this teacher says about it's looking awkward at first and unengaged, but half of communication is listening. So there's maybe processing going on that you can't see. I like how the teacher brings up the fact that these class talk, productive discourse is key from students learning from students. And your teacher really shouldn't be doing all the talking when you're in the classroom. It's definitely not a lecture style approach to instructional delivery. Give your staff a lot of support at the beginning, but not just at the beginning, all the way through. Praise, extra time, experts to consult, patients, and treats too. I mean, what teacher wouldn't want to go to their mailbox and have a chocolate bar in there saying, hey, you did some sweet things in science today? So keep those kinds of things in mind as well. Oops, back on that other page, I also forgot to mention there's a leader observation tool that I've included in the link. This was created by the folks at Boston College to help with, again, for you to know what to look for and how to give feedback that can help teachers adjust to this type of instruction in the various ways. So utilize that resource for you. Monitoring progress, you're looking for student engagement, of course. They should be active. They may not always be doing an experiment. They might be analyzing data. They may be working in small groups. They may be working as a whole group. One big component of OpenSciEd is the consensus model. You have a whole group discussion and every student has to be on the same page. So getting students to engage in those discussions, call it scientist circle, is a key instructional strategy for it. Assessments. These assessments are most likely different than what students are used to and maybe what your teachers are used to. In Wisconsin, we have the forward exam. That is three-dimensional assessment for the state test. You have probably something else as well. Kids have to be good readers. The lessons allow for many opportunities for informal feedback. But if you're a district that likes a lot of data points, it might be hard to get them into your grading system. So figuring out how the comprehensive assessment system matches your grading policies and practices in your class, in your districts, will be an important conversation to have as well. There are a lot of formative assessment opportunities, students, progress trackers, discussion, participation in discussion in cooperative groups. Those are all key points where your teacher is going to be looking for how kids are making sense, and then using those ideas to modify the instruction. There are summative assessments. There's a mid-summative assessment and a post-summative assessment that students will do. And there's probably also going to be some type of a performance task. They typically do that with a partner or in a collaborative group. Awesome opportunities to integrate language arts, speaking, writing skills, presentation skills. It really lends itself well to that. What's different about these summative assessments is that they're transfer tasks, meaning that you may be learning about wildebeests in an ecosystem and how it affects that ecosystem. And the mid assessment is on monarch butterflies. The first time this happened in a classroom, the students were flipped out. They're like, we didn't learn about monarchs, we were learning about wildebeests. And so having that patience and understanding with how that looks different. We want kids, if truly are understanding the concepts that they're being taught and not just memorizing or spitting back what they had done in the classroom, they should be able to transfer it. So the assessments may appear to be hard at first, but they do get easier. And there are opportunities for students to really show what they know as well as to make progress. So one thing, again, monitoring the progress of the students through that assessment system is going to be something that needs to be a discussion, especially as how your assessment connects to grading. The last point to consider from our PD participants was advocacy and communication. I love what this teacher said about the struggling learner. The struggling learners excel because the curriculum is equitable and accessible. The academic scaffolding, hands-on experiences, and connection making will help those students immensely. And it's so cool to see kids who are traditionally not successful in school feel like they can be highly successful. On the other hand, your traditionally strong students may struggle. There are very few, if any, activities in which problem answer skill sets is helpful. They make models, they learn from their mistakes, they construct answers. So those are all skills that are lifelong skills that they will take with them throughout their school career in high school, as well as into post-secondary education. Have a story, a testimonial from one of our teachers, a 7th grade teacher. Beginning of the school year, had a student who was an A student. She studied, she had note cards, she always got things right, things were easy for her, she knew how to be a good student. And she was struggling. There were tears, there were parent phone calls like, my kids never struggled before, what's going on, why is this so hard? And the teacher worked with the student, and by the end of the school year that year, the student approached the teacher and she said, I really hated science and it was hard. And I've never had to work hard before. I always knew what to do. And in your class at first, I didn't really know what to do. But then I kind of figured out that I got to listen to my classmates and I have to think for myself to make things make sense. I can't just, share things back. And so I appreciate how I had to actually learn how to think, but it wasn't easy. Your class was really hard, but I can see how it helped me. Now, wouldn't it be amazing to have a student come up to you at the end of the school year and share that type of insight in how they grew as a student and learned how to stick with the struggle and to learn how to be a better thinker, right? Another thing to remember about communication is here a lot of prep time, especially if you're not a science minor or your science isn't the only class you teach, right? So some teachers science isn't a thing. They may not have a science background, and so therefore the content might be kind of hard. and intimidating. I have a story for this one. This is a personal one. So I was classroom teacher for 27 years. I taught wavelengths for 17. And I knew wavelengths, right? And I'm preparing for a professional development session on 8.2, which is the sound waves unit. And I have my teacher's manual out. I've got the PowerPoints. I've got my notebook, and I'm thinking like the students. I'm putting myself in place. How are they making sense of this learning? And I'm about halfway through the unit, and it was like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I get it. I got it. I understand. And then I had like guilt and shame for a little bit because I was just understanding waves now. If that were the case, at what level was I teaching it for 17 years? Right? I knew it. I had the answer key. I knew what the answers were, but I didn't really understand the science until I looked at it this way. So for me, that was a huge aha of how powerful learning with OpenSciEd can be, not just for the teacher or for the students, but for the teachers too. Not having used wavelengths in my everyday life, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so some of the depth of concepts in the materials may be a little intimidating and scary for your teachers. So being an advocate and helping them see that that's okay that you don't understand it, you're going to figure it out together. And that can be unnerving for the teacher, right? Because as teachers, we always have to have the right answer. And so being an advocate for maybe, having that teacher do a little content refresher with one of the high school teachers or something like that. There is a section for adult learners in the teacher's guide that has some background videos and that type of thing. So that might be a helpful resource as well. So I've saved my favorite quote to last. This one is my favorite. This teacher says, eventually this curriculum will allow you to have a utopia of a science class. I love that. It's basically set up as, oh, you don't know how this works? Well, let's figure it out. I have some classes who can take this format and run with it. I have some classes that have low motivation and need to be pushed a little. This is the art of teaching and why AI will never replace teachers. I teach all 3 grades in middle school, and by the time they're in 8th graders, they're very good at the format. So it feels messy the first couple of units or for the first year. I promise it'll get better. It allows you to put your own personality into it, and it's not static, traditional textbook stuff. This teacher in particular teaches all 3 grade levels. Started using OpenSciEd maybe 4 years ago when the very first units for middle school started to come out. And on top of that, he was a math teacher. So for him to pick up the materials on his own and use it with students, and then for him to be able to share his long-term with us, his long-term view of how his students are by the time they get to 8th grade, is pretty exciting and insightful. So let's recap. Be familiar with OpenSciEd. Try to get some professional development or do some of the things you need to so that you are familiar with it. Rethink your resource allocation with your budget, your time, your talent within your staff. Professional development, strongly encouraged, strongly. Not one size doesn't always fit all, but keep in mind that it's not just a one and done as well. Have some intentional planning, not just for the first year, not just for the first unit, but for the first 3 years, and helping your teachers really fine tune their craft of facilitating discussions or being able to evaluate models and such. Allow collaboration time, encourage that PLC time, feedback and evaluation. Give your teachers grace. Help them be graceful for themselves even because it's such a heavy lift. Monitoring student progress, on the assessment system would be helpful. It's probably going to be a little shaky at first, but it'll get better the more they practice. If you shy away from it, they're never going to get better. If you keep trying to, adjust things because you think that that's how it's going to help them or this is what they need, let them struggle with it a bit. And you'll be surprised at how far they are going to be able to come. And then finally, advocacy and communication. Help your teachers out, reinforce to them that it's okay that we are only going to do 1 or 2 units the first time. Communicate how this is going to look and feel different to your stakeholders, your school board, your parents, your support staff. So I'd like to share with you, and I can't because I'm recording this and there are some issues. But I'm including the link here and in the follow-up email for a reflection from 2 educators who field tested the materials. There are videos that are available also for professional development. So these are some of this one in particular is a 4-minute video. I would highly encourage you to hear it directly from a teacher in the classroom who is part of the field testing of the middle school materials, to hear what they had to say and how their experience with using these materials for the first time, what it was like for them. Finally, thank you. Thank you for helping your teachers. Thank you for your time and energy today with this webinar. Thank you for the opportunity to share what I know and am passionate about. As a leader in your district, we want you to be successful, and we know that you want your teachers to be successful. So help your teachers become the chef of that awesome ice cream sundae that they have there. Thank you again for your time. If you have any questions or further ideas that you'd like to share, please feel free to reach out to me or any of the other certified professional learning providers on the OpenSciEd website. We're here to help. Thank you.